Hey everyone, welcome to the Plural Positivity World Conference. I'm Erika from The We and Me. Sorry about the background. I'm working with a couple different things and just kind of messing around with how I want to do this, but I kind of thought it was cool to be in a piece of our artwork. Because that goes to today's topic that I'll be discussing in this session of the conference. So for this session, I'm going to be talking about recovering from therapy. That can be a very complicated process for a lot of people. Additionally, for their parts, their alters, headmates, however you want to phrase that. I myself, I use the term parts because I view them as part of me. They are the we in me. That makes sense to people. I hope so. But moving on, recovery from therapy. That is one of those really big topics that I actually regularly get asked about. A lot of people, clinicians and others living with DID alike, they ask, well, if you're week to week, it's work, right? Therapy is work, regardless of who you are, how long you've been going, if you're a baby to therapy, or if you've been in therapy for 2 decades, or the middle ground like us. So, therapeutic boundaries. I'm just going to go through. I have about 7 specific talking points that I want to address for people because I know that some of these things specifically are what I get asked a lot. Additionally, I think it's a good base point to understand that therapy is work. It's just work. You're working to live a higher quality of life. You're working to heal. You're working to recover and work through the trauma. And with therapy, that can be problematic because there are layers of that can feel re-traumatizing to some people. Additionally, for those of you who know a little bit more about us, doctors and medical things, we're specific to some of our own trauma. So that gets really complicated at times. So let's just go ahead and jump right into the first thing that I want to discuss with you. Boundaries. Boundaries is something that I still work on today in therapy with the assistance of our psychologist. Therapeutic boundaries are important to have because a lot of the time the psychologist really, they mean well, right? They really want to help. They want to do their best to be there for you. They want to do their best to give you a safe space to where you can come and speak openly with them collectively. You collectively. So with our own psychologist, I'm going to just use us as an example. With our own psychologist, there have been certain things that most assuredly crossed boundaries. So some of that, I'm not going to get into the specifics of all of it, but some of those things is she has helped us financially. I don't mean like she gives me cash all the time. That's not what I'm talking about. What I mean by that is when we have been unable to pay her, she sees us and has continued to see us. When we had first began seeing her, and I say we in that instance and not me because I didn't become fully aware of her and this psychologist that we were seeing until well over a year into therapy. My parts initially began seeing her and seeking help for all of these different issues that we had going on. Some that I was aware of and some that I was not aware of. So, continuing forward, the boundaries. We needed to learn what healthy boundaries were. A lot of the time, people don't consider it. But if you have DID, you've probably not been taught what healthy boundaries are. You've probably not been taught that this is your choice. Whether it be you, the individual part, protector, however that works. But with therapy, for me, the goal is not integration in the way that psychologists talk about it. The goal specifically is to live a better quality of life and a unified life. Not this chaos, I all of a sudden poof disappear and run off somewhere, sometimes literally, end up in a different country, whatever the case may be. But learning some of these boundaries within ourselves and that mutual respect will help you gain boundaries with people on the outside. So your psychologist. discussing with them certain things that make you comfortable and certain things that don't make you comfortable. Additionally, a psychologist is a great person to talk to in regards to understanding some of these boundaries, because I just don't, it doesn't occur to me that certain things would be considered abnormal or certain things aren't the norm of a societal interaction, whether it be familial or with a relative, friends, relationships, however that may be. I very much use our psychologist as a sounding board for some of the things that come up in my day-to-day life. I want to know. I want to better understand what is going on in my life and why I am having a certain reaction to something. Okay? That is what your psychologist is there for. Now, the boundary of that is not to obsessively call every single time something comes up. The boundary of that is don't constantly text, don't constantly email. And that is something that we've discussed in therapy, because some of my parts would freak out, daily, and they would call our psychologist, especially earlier on into therapy. They would call her all the time. Hey, sorry, something's wrong. And all the time there was a crisis, because that's just what my life was before. Things are definitely very different now. Not that we're perfectly put together. We are not. Don't make that mistake. People often make that mistake just because I do a lot of public speaking. We discuss and address those problems regularly, just to be clear. The boundaries, though, are what has helped me be able to do some of these things. So speaking openly with our doctor, it doesn't mean that every session I will have this outpouring of emotion. Most of you out there who know who we are, the we and me, who regularly follow us or listen to our podcast, probably know that I don't really deal with high degrees of emotion. I just don't. My parts do. But with that, we're able to find these different aha moments in a way, in a manner of speaking. So some things move forward and progress, and then we'll discuss, okay, no, I can't address that today. There's a problem with the time of year. There's a problem with our sleep for that week, because it's a regular issue. There's a problem. I'm also diabetic, so I've been having I won't be able to focus because my blood sugar has been super high or super low, or doing the bounce thing that it does sometimes. So these are just 3 examples, but it's okay to address that in therapy. Part of boundaries is not solely relying on your psychologist, your doctor, your counselor, your therapist, your medical team, your mental health team, whatever it may be. It's relying on them to instruct you and show you what you weren't taught in early childhood, in some of these developmental years where you would typically learn something like that. That is perfectly acceptable to ask that of someone. The other thing that people get concerned about and wishy-washy about in some regards, as far as recovering from therapy goes, is that for me, I wouldn't necessarily put it that way. I wouldn't say I need to recover from therapy. Now, years ago, this is something that we talk about with our doctor pretty regularly. We had seen what I define as an unacceptable number of doctors. The number is well over 50. And specifically psychologists, therapists, counselors, under the realm and heading of psychological and mental health facilitators. Okay? So I define that as a very unacceptable number of doctors. I don't think that anyone should have to go to that many doctors to try and figure out what is going on in their life and what the problem is, which is, if you may have been able to guess, but that is why we do what we do now. We do the Living DID talks. I wrote the course last year. We're working on getting some of those things set up again, finding a facility and that sort of thing. So I'm hoping for more of the 7-week course to be scheduled next year. Now, one thing that people regularly talk about in regards to the boundaries is, well, they're my doctor and I want to be able to get better. But that doesn't mean that you just don't set up healthy boundaries for yourself. Your psychologist should as well, healthy boundaries for them. But their concerns, their mental health is not your concern, I think would be the best way to put that. What you need to focus on is you, the collective you, your system, again, however you define that, your headmates, your parts, your alters, whatever. You need to focus on all of those things and the structure of those things, and mapping some of those things can be very helpful for people. Additionally, in our last session, we discussed some about our binder and working with different headmates and trying to balance out the crises that can occur. And a lot of those things, when you're years into therapy, the crises, they lessen, but they do tend to be a piece of working a lot in therapy. So handling the spaces between the traumatic sessions is something that I also want to discuss. It's something that is very, very important, and it's something that we're very lucky in because my doctor understands that quite well. She understands the need for work that isn't trauma-based work. And we find that invaluable. I have some of my parts who find the I'm attempting to figure out the best way to say this. So they find play very difficult. They don't like the word, some of them, because for them, that's a triggering word. Now, I'm years into therapy. I do a lot of public speaking, so we have different structure in my brain. Quite literally, it's different in our structure, in that I can discuss some of these things without upsetting the balance within my system at this point. But again, that comes from years of work in therapy. And we haven't done very in-depth trauma work because it takes time. There's layer after layer of some of these things, which is why boundaries up front are important. Understanding that, yes, some littles or younger parts, younger protectors, whomever it is within the system, may begin to trust the psychologist, and some parts can be very affectionate. I certainly have a couple parts that can be overly affectionate, not even necessarily inappropriately affectionate. They just want people to like them because they want to feel safe. If someone likes them, then they're safe. This is how they view it, and this has been addressed as well with our psychologist. And she is aware of it, and we've discussed all manner of these types of things, and everything is fine. It's not that it's an uncomfortable conversation for her all the time, or for us all the time. It's just something that occurs, and it's something that needs to be addressed, right? So with the healing, that comes from the trauma work. It comes from all of the different little intricacies and all of the different little things that you maybe struggle with on any given day. And that can get really tricky. It can be overwhelming. It can cause disturbances in sleep. It can be such a complex thing to handle that it goes back to your boundaries. You need to address this to your psychologist, to your mental health team, to whomever it is that you're working with on this recovery process, on the understanding of who you are, who your parts are, all of these different things, on understanding each other, on getting that collective consciousness to now function and work together. With some of this, the handling of the space between the trauma work, we do this in our day-to-day life. As you can see, we do quite a bit of different artwork. This was just a charcoal drawing. And then as it fades in and out, you can probably see some of my room here. This is just our art room, and it happens to have the best lighting. So we do a lot of paint, a lot of painting, a lot of drawing. I crochet. It helps me with OCD, the crochet, because it helps me combat those obsessive compulsive behaviors. Because for me, I can't stand even numbers. And crochet, most patterns are done in even numbers. So for us, I know it's a bit backward to some people, but I do things in regards to odd numbers. That's where I get hyper-focused, that's where I get obsessive, and that is where many of my compulsions are from. But with the crochet, I utilize that in between some of these particularly difficult sessions. Additionally, It never bothers our psychologist, just to be clear, and this is true of a few psychologists that we've seen, because to be perfectly honest, I'm not saying that every psychologist we saw was bad and unhelpful. Many were. Many gave some of my parts one of them calls them lily pads. They were a jumping off point to get to the next psychologist that could potentially help us more. So in that, it's something important to discuss. If you need something while you're talking about those types of things, whether it be your favorite blanket or that there's a younger part that's particularly struggling, if you need to get them a stuffy, or ask your psychologist, especially if they've worked with children, a lot of the time they will have items in their office that you can hold in your hand, that you can play with. Another thing that we find very beneficial is, because I'll get lost in thought often, especially if something is interesting to me, I will just start rambling on and on and on, and then we've wasted the session. So textured sand is actually something that many clinical psychologists do have. And if they don't have it in their office, many can actually get it. And that is not, in my opinion, and from the different psychologists and clinicians that we've spoken to over the years, that is not breaking an inappropriate boundary. Okay, asking for something that would make the therapeutic experience more beneficial for you, more helpful. It would help you progress further. That is not out of bounds to ask for. If you, another example of that is light, like really bright sunlight tends to bother me. And I don't like things that are very bright. Like right now, it is light outside, and this is being lit with natural light because it just was what worked best. But I don't even have my blinds open, because if that light is hitting me directly in the eyes, it's painful to me. It makes me uncomfortable. I don't like it. So when we see our psychologist at her office, it's very dim lighting. These are things that you need to understand, and you can identify, and then you can express them to the other person across the table from you, across the couch, across the room, whatever it is, wherever it is, however it is that you meet. So, discussing some of those things are important. These are important things to address in therapy. Additionally, going back to the big thing that our psychologist understands that we find invaluable is her ability to say, okay, let's hold on. Let's stop for a second. And she'll hold the space, right? Holding the space is something people talk about. And then she'll say, we're going to change the subject, because she can just see the distress. And this does not happen every time, I want to be clear, because doing this type of work is what will help you move through that mess in your mind and that mess of memories. And doing so, it can be very helpful, and it is very helpful. But if you have 3 or 4 weeks in a row that are just in-depth trauma work for hours, like if you're doing extended sessions, I know a lot of psychologists will offer that with dissociative and trauma disorders, specifically DID. But if your doctor is going to offer that to you and has that understanding of, okay, you know what, this has been a month of really, really in-depth things. We need to hold the space. We need to take a minute. And then she'll actually play a board game with some of my parts. We'll play a board game. One of my parts, generally speaking, always has a deck of cards in her purse. So sometimes they'll play Go Fish. Sometimes they'll play, whatever it is, certain parts. They like to play poker. And again, boundary, right? We don't play poker for money with our psychologist. That should go without saying, but I'm going to address it, because that is a healthy boundary, something that your part enjoys, a part of you enjoys, and you find soothing. Our grandmother, our safe grandmother, liked to play cards a lot. We learned to play cards from a very, very young age. I remember watching them all play pinochle together on Sundays, and we learned to do that. This is a pleasant and joyous memory for the majority of my system. I would say every part of my system. So we discuss some of these things with my psychologist, and we'll play blackjack, we'll play 21, we'll play speed, we'll play whatever, endless amounts of card games. Additionally, it's not complicated to teach even a younger part to play cards. Cards are pretty simple. There's pictures on it, right? There's pictures, there's numbers. You don't even have to know certain things. You can be taught to play Go Fish. You can be taught to play Old Maid. And all you need is a cheap deck of cards to do that. Additionally, the deck of cards is something else that when we carry it with us, I have often in sessions fidgeted with it. It helps me. The sound of it, the texture, the smell. There are so many things with cards that can be beneficial. That completely depends on you and your system. But the texture, the smell, and the sound of them, that's 3 sensory things that hit really hard when you're having a hard session, if you're having a difficult time. If you're experiencing like that pull of dissociation in session because you're doing a lot of trauma work, taking that break and being able to have that sensory outlet is just very beneficial, and something that a lot of psychologists are completely fine with. I think people get it in their head that that authority figure is above all else. That's not necessarily true. A psychologist is there for discussion, as a guide. You shouldn't have to recover from it. You should work together to set these healthy boundaries. You should work together and have an understanding of each other. Each individual, each other. And that is just very true for our psychologists. Even some of my parts that are very, very self-conscious at this point in therapy have addressed certain things that bother them that she's done, or different things that she's said. And they address those things because if you don't tell somebody, the other person can't know. They're not mind readers. They are just people who have a PhD. Now, going on from there, it's going to be coming to balance, right? That's a lot of what I've been talking about back and forth, but let's address that specifically. So you take control of what the balance will be. Now, this is something that we've worked very hard to maintain in therapy through the appointments with our psychologist. Balance was one of the things that we addressed early on as one of our massive problems. We will take on 70 different things at one time, and then about 20 of them start to fall away because I become disinterested, because some of my parts who initially agreed forgot, or they became disinterested. There's all manner of different things that can occur with that, but it needs to be addressed. If you need help in maintaining balance, it's another one of those things that will create a healthy boundary for yourself and your psychologist or your mental health team. So if you know that next session is going to be trauma work again, poof. Talking's a struggle sometimes. Let me start over. So if you know that the next week is going to be another trauma discussion, if you want to continue working forward with it, you're nervous, you're upset about it, but this is the work that you want to do. You've made that choice. Now you have to make the choice to find the balance in that. So if this is what you're going to be working on for, let's say, the next 3 sessions in therapy, if you know and you've discussed it, you've negotiated it with your psychologist, because there's nothing wrong with doing that. It is a part of boundaries, and how someone can know yours is if you have this discussion and negotiate what you're comfortable with. So let's say that you guys agree to 3 sessions over the next 3 weeks, right? You touched on it today, but the next 3 weeks, that's what you want to do. You want to work through some particular thing, or some things, a particular period of life, however it works for you and your psychologist and your team. So the balance of that for us is, I know that the next 3 weeks, not the next 3 sessions, the next 3 weeks are going to be difficult for my parts. I am aware that it is going to then impact me and be difficult for me to do certain things. So, example with the podcast, I won't schedule guests in the next 3 weeks. I will go to the bank of episodes that we have pre-recorded. Okay? And I'm just using myself as an example so you guys can get a better understanding. However this is applicable to your life is what you would do. So day one, there's a lot of anxiety. My parts are anxious. They know that it's coming. But that's what I address within myself. I will say it aloud or within my own head, because as you know, I don't have to talk to them out loud. So it is going to be okay. I am here. I am the one deciding this with you. This is what we've discussed. This is what we've negotiated. We've addressed our concerns with our psychologist. There is nothing more that can be done about it, but here's what we're going to do today. My husband, I'll explain to them. He's here if you need to talk to him. We have Drogi. It's one of our dogs. He's very large and heavy, so if he sits in my lap, that presence is comfortable because there's the texture of his fur. There's the rough texture of his paws. There's the slobber when he gives us a kiss. His ears are very distinct. He has little curves in his ears, and we do rub his ears because it's soothing. He has a distinct smell. He's not dirty, but he's a dog, and he has a distinct smell, just like another person would. Scent, very powerful. Touch, texture. These different things really help us, and let's say that's day one. That's what we do. This part will tell Sean, like, listen, I don't want to be mean to you. I'm just having a really hard time. So maybe don't really talk to me the next couple weeks because it's going to be really hard for me. I'm really nervous. And number one, he'll say, are you okay? Jinx, are you okay? Bob, whomever it is, because at this point in our marriage, at this point in therapy, they've begun talking to him a little bit more. So he will address if we are okay, if they need to further talk to him. And he's a very loving man, but he's not very conversational. So they know that, but despite some of his discomfort, he will still address these things with them. He will still be there for them, and they appreciate that. Following that, some of you know, we rescue ferrets. We have 4 at the moment. Most of them are getting older now, but they're weasels and they love to play. So, another part on day 2 or 3 or 5, because we're coming up to the appointment now, the very first session where we're doing more in-depth trauma work, and she gets really agitated and makes a big mess in my room. Her paints, her coloring books, her coloring pages, the different things that she creates are all over the place. It's chaos. When I become aware of it, I address it. Why is this a mess? What happened? And whether it be fear or anxiety, or she was trying to help somebody else who was dealing with it, so she began distracting them and made coloring pages for them. I'm talking about Toon, for those of you who know who I mean. She's a 10-and-a-half-year-old protector in my system, and she's very, very artistic. She actually does a lot of our own coloring pages. Some of this was done by her as well. She does a lot of different illustrations. So if that happens, then at this point in therapy, I'm aware, depending upon what has been tossed about, but if it's those types of items, I know it was Toon, either who is in distress or who was trying to help somebody else who was. And I address that. Okay, so what is going on? And this is what you can do in between sessions. And this is what I mean when I say therapy is work. It is daily work. It's not that I dwell on these things all the time. It's that these are things that come up. Sometimes I do still I have gaps in my time, in my memory. I understand why now, though. So I address why. What occurred that somebody needs help with? What occurred that I can be helpful in? You need to explain it to me so I can then explain to you the situation and we can move on from there, or we can bring it up in session next week. Or if it's a really big crisis, we will figure it out. Because that's the other piece of things, is that sometimes certain parts, when they get in any person, when they get in that panic mindset, they forget they're not alone. There's somebody there. If you have DID, a lot of the time, I do have parts who still do this, where they're like, no, I got it, it's fine. Yeah, but you don't have to anymore. I understand that you can handle that on your own. I know you can. What I'm saying is that I'm almost 32 years old and I'm the adult that can handle it for you, because you as a child shouldn't have had to handle that on your own. And now, if you need it, the option is there that you don't have to handle it on your own, which I think is one of those things that is a piece of what I mean by when I say take control of the balance. So I don't mean that I yell at my parts and berate them. There's no reason. Most of them are children. And B, that doesn't help anything. That's what occurred regularly throughout my life. If there was a problem, it was dismissed or yelled at. That doesn't do anything. Conversation does. All that does, all the yelling does, all the fear does, all the frustration does, and I don't mean I don't get frustrated. Please don't misunderstand me. All those problems and my reactions to them just make my parts not want to talk to me. It just makes the inside more frustrated and more chaotic. And that is just not a problem that I want to backslide into. That was my life before therapy. That was my life at the very beginning of therapy. And now that is lessening. These things are getting smaller and smaller and smaller and more manageable because of the boundaries that we have with each other, with our psychologist, with everybody that we encounter in my life. When we are around relatives, another example of that, and this is what I mean by balance. I'm coming back to boundaries because they connect in a major way. When you know that hugging upsets some parts, and you know that there's a particular person, you can feel it, right? A lot of people with DID talk about this phenomenon where I don't even know if phenomenon is the proper word, but they discuss this feeling like I don't know if I can identify who I feel right now, but I just feel uncomfortable. I feel I can't be touched right now. It is okay to say it, regardless, relative, friend, coworker, whomever, that you would even typically, even if you would typically hug this person, it's okay to explain to them, I can't, I'm sorry. Hold on. It's that simple. We've done this with our friend Jessie. She is a perfect example of that because she has experienced that with us. My system adores Jessie. We've known her over 20 years now, I think. It's right in that realm. Not right now. She goes, okay, you're good. One of the first times it occurred, she's our friend, so everything okay? She wasn't mad. She was concerned. I think people, especially with DID and some of these different types of parts, the reaction is fear. It's reactionary fear from habit. If I don't do something, whatever it was, if I don't do this thing, this person is going to be angry with me and I'm going to be in trouble. I'm going to be punished in some way. You're an adult now. That is one of the biggest lessons and boundaries that we found in seeing our psychologist. Oh, didn't occur to anyone in my system before. I know that sounds strange. Now, to be fair, some of them understood certain things and they understood the situation that was occurring long before I knew. But it was different because it didn't occur to them that, oh, right, yeah, because we're working now and we're doing all these different things and it's actually helping. So she can decide, no, I don't want to hug. And it's that simple. That is literally what I will say. I will just, if it's something that's going on and I don't want to explain it, that's my choice. That is the balance I need and the boundary I set. When someone comes back at you with, what do you mean? Why? What's wrong? And they laugh. I just can't be touched right now. I don't want a hug. I just don't want one. I enjoy being around you. I want to continue our lunch or whatever it is, like let's hang out, let's watch a movie, whatever's occurring, whatever it is that we're around each other. But right now, I just can't let you touch me. Oh, okay. That's it. Another lesson that we learned as far as setting boundaries is that some people just don't understand them. It doesn't mean that they think you're a weirdo. It doesn't mean that they think you're stupid. It doesn't mean that they think you're overreacting even. Even if they say that, it is an emotional response from them because they want to be close to you. But if you can't at that time, that's all you have to say. Nope, I can't right now. That's it. Their reaction to that is their responsibility. Boundary. That is a big one that we learned too. The boundary of we don't need to appease and protect everybody that we encounter. That is not my responsibility. Their well-being is not my responsibility. Their well-being and emotional responses to me being perfectly clear, I just can't hug right now. Not my responsibility. This is the boundary I set for myself and for my system because this is what will keep us okay right now. And then the impact of that, though, on my system has been massive because they understand, okay, so wait, there's still discomfort, of course. There's still uncertainty, but we address these things. I'm not going to let somebody touch you. This is me. This is my body. This is my choice. And right now, this is what I choose. You're around and you're not comfortable with it. I can't even identify at times who it is that's around or what is the problem. And especially when it comes to Jessie because they adore her. So, Jess, I'm not sure what's going on. I can't take a hug right now. Oh, okay. Everything all right? I think so. I'm just not sure what's wrong. And I'm not sure if there is something wrong or if they're just agitated. She's like, yeah, okay, no problem. You want to play with the dogs? Or whatever it is that we're doing. Well, or it just skips right to the next normal piece of our conversation. Your friends, especially the people who know that you live with DID, will ask questions not to go against your boundary, but because they truly do care about you. That's another thing that is really difficult to accept and understand. And that goes to the next piece that I want to discuss is owning the process. Right? That is a piece of a little bit of what I touched on here, but owning the process of recovering, right? Recovering for yourself, for your system, to benefit your quality of life, to gain understanding of different things that occur, and to have an overall positive impact on who you are as a person. Otherwise, why the hell would somebody do all of this, right? I'm just going to be blunt. Like, therapy is work. It is. It gets really difficult. We understand that. We do it still. It gets really messy sometimes. But owning that process and understanding the importance of these boundaries and then finding the balance of it. If you're having a particularly difficult week, again, let's say we discussed 3 trauma sessions in a row, right? This is what we're planning on doing. This is what we've negotiated with our psychologist and amongst ourselves. We're owning that process. We're moving forward with it. This is what we've chosen. This is what we want to do. Week 2 comes around. We haven't slept in, let's be reasonable and just give a basic of we haven't slept in 2 days, right? If you have DID, you know that can vary greatly. So it's been 2 days since we've slept. We go into the office, we're discussing it with our doctor, and we explain to her, all right, doc, listen. We want to do this work, but you need to be aware that we haven't slept now in 2 days. We want to try, okay? I know we have an extended session today. We want to discuss it. If we need to stop, we're going to tell you we need to stop. We're going to use because some of my parts they'll say certain things, a safe word if you like, and they'll say, nope. I keep hearing this in my head. We can't continue. We have to stop. There's certain things that are occurring that we just can't address this right now. And like the very good trauma-informed and now very DID-informed psychologist that she is, she stops and we move on. And she'll ask us, how's Bob's book coming? Has Toon finished another illustration? Do you have pictures of any of these illustrations? how are the dogs? Because she knows we have 3 dogs. And then she'll ask about the ferrets because she knows that one of them is much older and he's a little sick right now. So all of these different things, they're a part of it. And I think the misunderstanding and some of the fear comes from the acknowledgement that it is your choice now. Acknowledging and realizing that whatever it was that your life was before that caused the DID, that wasn't okay. It's accepting and owning that as part of the process, and then gaining the understanding that it's good and okay to know that there's a grieving, there can be a grieving process, there can be a period of grieving, there can be this like sense of loss at times. Not that you lose a part of yourself, I don't mean that, but I mean you just have this moment of, oh yeah, that wasn't okay, that wasn't normal, that wasn't appropriate, that wasn't a typical experience at age 9 or at age 4. That's not what life should be. And then when you start to get to a point, or when some parts start to get to that point, there can be many variations of this, but for us specifically, we had to figure out how to de-escalate the backlash of that, because there absolutely was backlash and still is from time to time. And I still learn more about my system pretty regularly. And it's not that there's poof, a new part or something like that. That's not what I mean. That doesn't really occur. But de-escalating the backlash, I mean, okay, we haven't slept for 2 days. I'll use that as an example because these are real examples from my life, right? We haven't slept in 2 days. There's been panic attacks going on. I've been working with the boxes that I have, because in my home, I have little things throughout my house that are in particularly difficult areas or rooms of my home. So in my nightstand next to my bed, that's something else with sleep. And owning this process helps you understand some of these things. And by doing so, having these boundaries, having that balance established and sticking to it, it's an important part. And then owning the process of this life that you're building for yourself now, because your life before doesn't have to be the life that you've always had. You can change things. So de-escalating some of these issues that can arise from change, because change brings my mind right back to inconsistency. And inconsistency is one of the biggest problems that we discuss and address all the time. Inconsistency can kill. And it nearly killed me multiple times. It's just this, you don't know what to expect thing. And that is a big trigger and fear for a lot of people, us included. Like, okay, well, if I'm not doing this, then what the hell is my purpose, Doc, right? My parts say that to her very, very regularly earlier on. It comes up from time to time just because we have a week of really bad dreams or night terrors, or we're not able to sleep for several days, and then they just get stuck thinking, and then sometimes some of them will create this artwork that is super dark. But facilitating and de-escalating the backlashes are just a part of keeping the consistency of communication going. It's a big piece. I understand change can be frightening. I have no struggle understanding that in any capacity. But understanding that putting in place positive boundaries isn't a negative change. It's not the same inconsistency that was experienced before. This is not what is occurring. This is very different. This is very thought out. This is very, very focused on, right? This is something that we've determined and decided that is going to occur collectively, together. This is what we've discussed we're going to do. Now, it doesn't mean that an hour after the session, there's not going to be fear and holy crap, what did we just do? It happens. Breathe through it. What can we do to calm down after this session? What can we do to make this better? What can I do to make this better for you? Tune is an easy example. she generally wants a new stuffed animal. She wants me to make something new for her. There is all kinds of stuff around my room that I've made them. Giant pillows, giant elephant pillows. Some of you who follow us on Twitter have probably seen those things. The llama that we made, it's a little stuffed llama, and Tune loves it. These different things, but when people have spoken with us via Skype for the podcast, they see our room and they're like, wow, that is really cool, all the different stuffed animals that you have. And it is, but to me, it represents a time that there was a problem, but our progress through that problem. We've de-escalated the problem. I've figured it out. Okay, this is what you like, so this is what I negotiate with them, and this is what we will do. I understand that you want to color right now, but I need to sit down and do a video for the Plural Positivity World Conference. That literally happened like 2 hours ago. But it's this type of thing, and it's understanding that the consistency is then up to you. It's owning the process of this. It's understanding that your psychologist, your mental health team, your psychiatrist, if you're taking medication, all of these different things need to be a well-oiled machine. They need to work together, and they need to have an understanding of the boundaries that are being set, an understanding of the consistency that you're looking for in your life, an understanding of what your individual parts need. Some of my parts need to stop a session flat. Just boom, nope, no more doc, nope. And at this point, she understands us, she knows us. We have taken the time to discuss it with her and explain what was going on. Even if it meant me explaining, I got no idea what happened. Somebody's not happy about it. I can feel my head is pounding, my eyeballs hurt from the migraine that's coming on. I don't know what is wrong, but if it's that instantaneous, we should back off and we can address it next session. And if it's still a problem, then you know what? Maybe we wait until the season changes, because that's another thing that clinicians, some of them that we have worked with and trained, they are quite good at that now. Our psychologist excels at that more often than not, coming back to something at another time. And it could be coming back to it months later when somebody is feeling more comfortable. Often it's Jinx who will then bring it up. Hey, doc, remember when we were talking about this? I think we should address it today. And then if it's something regarding Jinx, then they'll discuss it. If it's not, then she'll just step back, and then our doctor and I will sit and have a conversation about it. And then whomever it is pertaining to will hopefully hear and understand, okay, Erika's got my back. She knows my boundaries. She knows the balance that I need individually, because that's different for different parts. It absolutely is. So understanding some of those things and working through them is a big piece to minimizing the backlash and not even necessarily having to constantly de-escalate a situation. But if you maintain some of these things, and I have parts that still won't talk to our doctor, just to be clear, but they're being helped. And it's very tricky to understand that for some people. However, certain things have been changing. The the general fear, because some of these parts are protectors and they have protected others, but the general fear mentality has diminished, right? We don't fear that she's just going to hospitalize us because of an overreaction to something one of my parts says, because they're having a really crappy day. It can happen. We know people it's happened to. It's happened to us, but sort of. But it's about finding that balance, and it's about being perfectly clear in the words that you use and honest with your mental health team, with your psychiatrist, psychologist. You know I keep repeating these things in regards to whom I'm talking about, but it's important to understand that if you do have a team that is a part of your care, address it with them. These things need to be discussed so then everybody can understand, because then if everybody is on the same page, those de-escalations will happen less and less, right? Because there won't be that surprise. Like, okay, well, this doctor doesn't really know about that, so maybe I should just be here, and Erika doesn't have to deal with it, because then well, what if something happens? What if she says something that she shouldn't say? That type of thing. And, the de-escalation of this is seriously just about keeping that consistency, maintaining those boundaries, and then holding those experiences and understanding that this is a process, right? This is entirely a process, a decades-long process. And it takes time to understand and reestablish a life and understand what it is that, okay, so this is what we do now. How can we better that? And I felt it just now. One of my parts scratched my head to remind me of an example that I was going to say earlier, but didn't. De-escalation. I am a scratcher, right? I am a lip picker and I'm a scratcher. And I don't even consciously realize that I'm doing it. Several of my parts do the same type of behavior. And I think, in some instances, it has been a way for one in particular to help me slow my thought processes and explain myself in a clearer, more articulate way. Because it's painful, right? We dig, and it is painful. But that de-escalated. That actually has minimized massively over the last few months now. And I mean, these things are recent. Like, this is something that I have regularly done for my entire life, and I don't even consciously realize that it's occurring at times. But this is some of the natural thing that can occur through owning the process of therapy, through some of these open and honest and very difficult conversations. I am not saying it's easy. Please, again, don't misunderstand me. This is hard and it is work. But if you can get to these little steps, it's all these little steps, because a process indicates, the word itself indicates that there are steps that need to be taken. So if you set up these boundaries, if you have these open conversations with your parts, with your system, with your psyches, all of these different people that are a part of helping you maintain your care and growing and living your best quality of life and understanding what that means, then the very next step is living and not surviving anymore. Because that was a big thing that I address as well, is that that was one of the very first conversations I myself had with our psychologist, is that, you know how exhausting it is to feel like you're surviving and you're not living? Like, that's not awesome. Like, it's not an exciting way to live, but then you need to then discuss this with your system openly. All of the different care people that are in a part of your life, the people who care about you that are in your day-to-day life, as well as your full team, because we also have a surgeon. We also have doctors who help us with our diabetic care. All of these different things, many of these doctors, now I don't necessarily disclose the DID diagnosis to them, but I explain to them that I have a trauma history. It is that minimal, and okay, what do you need? Our dentist, they were a fantastic team at Aspen Dental. And it's some of these things, and owning the process is a part of this. It's addressing these things. It's understanding that, okay, you know what? I'm not in a place where I can do that right now. But it's understanding that where you want to go. It's understanding that it's your choice. It's understanding these conversations need to occur, and then things can begin to fall into place. The last thing that I wanted to talk with everybody about was coping techniques for after session. Okay, so we get through those 3 sessions. We made it through them all. We ended up doing the second, and then it facilitated the time into the third. So we did it. Okay? That is 3 weeks of extended sessions. So let's say it's 9 hours. Let's say it's 8 or 9 hours of work, right? You're exhausted after those 3 weeks because you haven't been sleeping well to begin with, and all of these different things. So session to session, this is another piece of boundaries and owning the process. You don't go through those 3 weeks in chaos and then take 3 weeks off from life after. You do it day by day. some of these different things I had mentioned. Some of my parts like to paint. They need a new stuffed animal. I do have people who donate yarn to us. So again, thank you, all of you. You're wonderful people. That really does help me in the therapy process. And all of these different things that occur. You read a book. If you can't focus on the book, you write words down. If you can't write words down, you think them in your head. If you can't think them in your head, you tap your fingers. If you can't tap your fingers, then you focus on the wall in front of you. I know, it sounds strange, but I do that all the time. And people often have asked me, like, well, what if it's just a white wall? Then you focus on the wall in front of you, because it is a white wall. Mine, the white wall in front of me, it has ridges in it. Those ridges are not on the other wall over here. But the thing about both of those walls, they're both white. But they're both drastically different. They both have divots in different areas. And then my mind begins to move and roll forward, and it's like, oh, okay, well, that one has 368 divots in this panel alone. This wall, though, doesn't have a panel, so I've counted now to 1,172. What was going on? Oh, right, I just had a session, and okay, so now after that struggle with dissociation, I can then address my parts. Okay, what is going on? Why did I just dissociate? Additionally, I'm a clock watcher, just so people can relate to me. I imagine most of you can relate to that. I am a clock watcher. I typically have a watch on. I typically have a clock in front of me. There's a clock. There's actually 2 clocks over here next to me. My husband knows that I collect clocks. So Christmas or our anniversary, he typically gets me a clock. And we never mind. So, coping techniques for after a session. Aftercare, right? It's a term many people are familiar with. Aftercare is massively important. If you know that some of your parts settle down when they have a sucker, get a bag of Dum Dum suckers. They sell them at dollar stores. They sell them at Walmart. You can get them just about anywhere, no matter what country you're in. They're cheap, and it makes you happy. You can buy a big old bag of them. It's excellent. Let's say you don't have money to do that, though. Okay, what do you have that you can use as a coping technique? What can you accumulate through over time that can help you best understand what is occurring, best give you the best outcome, right? So what can you do? You can paint. I don't care if you're an artist or not. You can paint. You can literally take paint and scribble it on a paper, because it's a distraction technique, because of the texture of it, because of the smell of the paint. These different things can be very, very beneficial. And I want people to understand that, and I really hope that this session was very helpful for you. Please don't hesitate to reach out. You can find us on Twitter at The We and Me. You can find us on our podcast, The We and Me, as well as the We and Me blog at gmail.com. If you have any questions after you watch this session, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We have no problem discussing it with people, and we hope that you all enjoy the rest of the conference. We'll see you tomorrow for our next session. Bye, guys.